everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. All off-season, we are doing our very best to help you win all your fantasy leagues. George and I are very excited today to welcome John Hansen to the show. John, how are you?
I'm doing well. What's up, guys? Ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, man.
Sweating our asses off here in the Northeast, ready for training
Absolutely.
camps to open up.
Absolutely.
Where are you, John?
I'm in New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I am getting ready to move down south, but I've been a Jersey person basically my whole life. I've never lived outside of New York or New Jersey.
We moved to the beach down in North Carolina like 8 or 9 years ago, and we noticed that during COVID, when everybody could work from home, folks from New Jersey and New York were flooding down south. How far south are you going, John?
South of Savannah, Georgia.
Nice.
My daughter is going to college in Savannah, so we're moving on down there to support her and just check out a new area of the country. I am scared to death of the heat, but I am looking forward to barbecuing on like Christmas Eve, stuff like that.
I've heard it's beautiful there, by the way. I heard it's great down there.
I've been several times. It is quite a beautiful place. John, you've had a very interesting fantasy football career. Been at most of the major places, basically started the SiriusXM channel for fantasy football. Do you have a favorite stop along the way?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was very fortunate to do a lot of different cool things. A lot of people don't even know this, but I was actually the first person to do any fantasy content for ESPN in 1996. It was back then. It was called ESPN Net Sports Zone or something like that, if you recall. I actually got hired, and I didn't even know it was ESPN because it was a company called Starwave that ran the website. But Starwave was owned by Paul Allen, of course, who ended up owning the Seahawks and all that. So that was an interesting thing. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say the Sirius XM show, 20 plus years. It's been pretty cool to do a national radio show and do a morning show for a decade and just wake up every day and talk fake football. Not that I thought I'd be doing that when I started this fantasy analyst stuff, but it's been really good. And I work very hard, but I go back to when I started. I'm like, I love this, and I usually have a pretty good feel for what people like and what's popular. And I'm like, this fantasy football stuff is in lieu of like doing drugs. Like, I mean, it feels like I'm doing drugs because I'm getting all these dopamine rushes. I'm like, this is unbelievable, and I got to get in this, and that's exactly what I did. And so I was, right place, right time. There weren't many other analysts out there when I started.
What was the genesis? How did you guys decide to start Fantasy Points?
Well, I had another site, Fantasy Guru, for 25 years. I was approached by a group that wanted to purchase the website, and I'm like, all right, well, I did that. I was just going to do media, and I did like a 5-year non-compete. I actually worked for the website for like 4 years. I didn't even tell anybody I sold it. Still, did everything I normally did, but it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to do the media, radio. I was doing direct TV for a decade as well, but I just had such a great group of guys that were working with me at Guru, and they wanted to start up another site. And I realized, I do have I'm in a position, to do this very seamlessly because of my place in the business for 25 years. So it was just like, I have to do it. We did it, and it's been going well. But up until last year when we launched Fantasy Points Data, which is now a game-changing situation because I call it the PFF of fantasy. We chart every play of every game. We have 700 plus data points on every play, and we built some badass tools. So it's kind of like a rocket ship now. I think we're going to be taken over soon as like the data source in a lot of the hard to find data. For example, I can look up Terry McLaurin right now and speculate that it was probably top 25 in first read target share. That's a stat that didn't exist before we invented it last year. So, the percentage of dropbacks in which you are the first read, and you have to know how to determine that. There is a little bit of guesswork involved, but we have people who know what the hell they're doing. So yeah, that's an example of how I feel the fantasy points data is going to kind of take it over. And I kind of saw that coming. I'm like, yeah, I want to do this, even though I'm working my ass off over here. Let's put in another 10 years because this thing is going to be a rocket. And so far so good.
You're talking about charts spanning a course of 30 years almost. What has been the biggest change that you've seen?
Oh, well, I think it's a big picture macro change. I always tell this story because it's funny. When I started, I had a hard copy newsletter, and there was only so much space you can get on. It was like 4 pages. This is before everyone was on the internet. I'm
Hmm.
talking 96, 97, I think maybe 98. Uh, but there was, I think it was 97. It was a line of analysis about Falcon running back Jamal Anderson. I had run out of room. So the analysis for the week was he'll be fine. That's it. He'll be fine. And he was. He ran for 100 yards. I went back and I looked years later. I'm like, oh, wow, he was
Nailed
fine. He
it.
caught like 4 balls for 22, and he had like 20 carries for like 100 yards and a touch. But you'd be laughed out of every chat room or social media platform if you did not bring it with real concrete
Absolutely.
sophisticated analysis. So that's what I've seen, and I was part of that. Like I was like an eyeball test guy. Like I've made calls on guys like on, you know, 1 or 2 games. I once drafted Sterling Sharp in 11 overall. People thought I was literally insane. I'm going to go look up the numbers. It was just a gut feeling. That's kind of my strength. I'm like, this guy's a baller, and
Hmm.
they're going to get better quarterback play. He had 55 catches for 791 yards and 1 touchdown in 88. The next year in my draft, I took him at 11 overall. People are like, what are you doing? He had 90 catches for 14, 23, and 12 touchdowns. I couldn't have gotten away with whatever analysis I had on Sterling Sharp in 89. It was fine in 89. I wasn't even in the business in 89, but it was just like, he's good. You know what I mean? Like you can't get away with that now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely that innate feeling there. So obviously, you had a great journey throughout this entire career, Yahoo, Sirius, NFL.com. I just find it really fascinating, right? I'm sure in this business, you have to have chemistry with people that you work with. Who is someone like a former player? Because I find it's always pretty intriguing. A former player that you work with, you have great synergy with. Like you walk into their studio room, you're like, man, this person, you see eye to eye with them. It's just magic when you guys work together. Who's someone that you love working with in the industry?
Well, I think I'm pretty good at making a co-host feel comfortable over the years,
Hmm.
and I've done a lot of shows with former players, like you mentioned there. So
Hmm.
that's number one. I've been doing this for a while, so I have a pretty good feel for it. I feel like I'm a pretty good person in general and good dude. People like me, like to just have a beer with you, kind of a guy.
Absolutely.
So that's always nice. But I'd have to say it's tough. I mean, I did a show with Tori Holt for
Hmm.
on Sirius XM for a number of years. We had a ball. I mean, it was just a
Yeah.
good listen, I think. Uh, Ladainian Tomlinson.
Yeah.
I did a show with him. I just did a podcast with him myself at Fantasy Points.
I saw that.
And then, of course, I did a show with Fran Tarkenton way
Mm.
back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So those are three that come to mind. But again, I've been really fortunate to be able to work with some really good ones. Actually, I should mention my favorite player of all time is in fact Sterling Sharp.
Mm.
And Sterling's, he's a different cat. He was very boisterous, but now he's kind of low key, and he's one of those deals where like he's either he likes you or he doesn't. But
Hmm.
luckily for me, him and I hit it off really well, and I used to make him laugh on the set between takes and stuff, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm gonna go with Sterling Sharp. Actually, I got to give my love to my man Sterling, but LT is right behind.
He was a fantastic watch in Green Bay, by the way. I love watching him and Brett Favre work together in Green Bay. Sterling
Oh,
Sharp. Awesome.
amazing! I was routinely drafting him over Jerry Rice, by the way.
Okay. There you
Yeah.
go.
All right, John, as we get into things that will help us win this year in redrafts, I'm curious. There's a lot of teams that have multiple weapons. I'm thinking like the Eagles. The Bears actually kind of have a stacked offense when you're talking about fantasy players. Houston, the San Francisco 49ers. What do you do with guys where a lot of them are probably similar ADPs, but who knows when they'll get the ball on what day? Do you how what would you make of those
Yeah,
teams?
yeah. I mean, That's a great point you bring up, actually, because I've been complaining about this for a while, the proliferation of, spread formations, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers on the field. I've been saying that there's more receivers on the field involved touching the ball than ever before. So it's diluting everything. So, yeah, that's a problem. And I think the Bears, for example, as you mentioned, I'm looking at Roma Dunze right now. He's going off the board at like 75 overall. It's like, guys, you do know there's only one ball. So
Mm,
you
right.
are literally projecting Keenan Allen to miss time, or else
mm,
you're probably wasting the pick. I said this same exact thing last year about Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it is a worthwhile exploration, and it's very obvious, but I think it's worthwhile. Number one, Jackson Smith and Jigba was a buzzkill last year because Pete Carroll and the offense there last year, they didn't run a lot of 11 as much as others, so his snaps were somewhat limited. But that also is a good explanation as to, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they're pretty consistent. Why? Well, they're good, but they don't throw to that third receiver. So, that's a good lesson. And you mentioned Philly. I think Philly has been similar. Like it's skinny Batman. I default to calling him that. Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, and maybe a little Dallas Goedert, but they have not used a third receiver, and I think that's why Devontae Smith, for example, has beaten his ADP 3 years in a row. So just a very low key, nuanced kind of a tip, and some might seem obvious to some people, but if you have a team that really doesn't run a lot as much 11 or doesn't have a dominant third or a good, really really good tight end, if it's a two-headed monster, so to speak, like Philly has been in Seattle, that's good. And conversely, you don't want to overdraft a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba last year because, again, there's only one ball.
And as we talk about the Bears and the Eagles, they both added pass catching backs for the most part. How does that affect into the other receivers?
Yeah, I mean, it can take away. Barkley, by the way, that is a big question this year because will Jalen Hurts check it down to Barkley? I believe that Kellen Moore is good at scheming guys in the backfield, running backs. Think about Tony Pollard, how good he was the year before last. Well, last year Kellen Moore left and Pollard was a shell of himself. I think some of that is Kellen Moore putting him in a good position. I don't necessarily worry about, oh, well, Alvin Kamara is getting 80 plus grabs. So therefore, maybe we shouldn't draft, Jimmy Graham this year or something like that. I don't really worry about that, but I mean, it is part of the equation of more dudes touching the ball than ever. I remember when LaDainian Tomlinson told me a great story going into 03, I believe. He told LT LaDainian that he was going to catch 100 balls. And LT's like, what? 100 balls? What are you, crazy? And he did. Well, now we're used to that now. I think that we could offset the running backs catching the ball a little bit more with more passing in general. So I'm not that worried about it, but it's certainly part of the puzzle that you're looking at.
And John, with that, we've been doing a lot of best balls on Wednesday and interacting with a lot of fantasy content people. With best ball, you deeply dive into stacks and having like multiple players from the same team and kind of working off each other. Do you avoid that strategy in redraft leagues? Like, for instance, the 49ers and like Ayuk and Kittle and, I guess Purdy as well. Like, do you pursue stacks in a redraft league, or do you kind of stay away from that as opposed to best ball?
My mindset on it is to avoid it because it puts too much of your eggs in one basket. But on the other hand, it's all or nothing. Do we want to take down a tournament? Then we gotta suck it up. So I would say my default is to not do that because that does seem to be, again, putting all your eggs in one basket. What if they roll coverage over to your receiver that day and he catches 2 balls for 12? Now you're kind of screwed. But again, to move the needle, that is the necessary formula.
Gotcha. And then a follow-up. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, George.
I got a follow-up question. Do running backs even matter in fantasy football even anymore? I know it's kind of a provocative question to put out there. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is in a league of his own, but I feel like once you kind of get to Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, they are intriguing and they're interesting prospects. But then, even after that, do you go no running back strategy, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, another great question. Certainly, I've been more skeptical of the running backs than ever.
Hmm.
In fact, last year, I'm an old school guy,
Hmm.
programmed to go running back in my draft. Last
Hmm.
year I was the least inclined to go running back early than I ever have been. And that was a function of the wide receivers. One of my lines last summer was, "Hey, follow the money. These wide
Hmm.
receivers are getting paid." And these
Hmm.
running backs are being treated like not well. Like, look at
Hmm.
John Taylor. He had to really pull a dramatic holdout just to get a fair contract, basically. So, that said, every year is different. And I actually do believe this year that there is a small collection of running backs who are extremely appealing.
Mm.
And I will take them over a wide receiver in round one. And then they will also be my anchor running back because, to your point, again, running backs kind of don't matter. They are being pushed down the board. So that's the one tip I'll give. Like, I'm not afraid this year to go running back in round one. I'll take Bijan
Hmm.
and Brees Hall,
Brees Hall, ETN.
and Taylor
Hmm.
and Gibbs. I'll put Gibbs there. That would have to be the
Okay.
back of round one. It's not the greatest first round pick, but I like the stability of having a stud running back. And my criteria is generally it's got to be young, durable, and versatile. No offense to Christian McCaffrey, but I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey at one overall this year.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll regret it. That doesn't mean it's a bad decision. I just think I think it's too much risk. I know
Mm.
he's turned a corner, but he's also getting older the last couple of years. He's turned a corner with the injuries. I do think that injury he had last year, I think it was a calf.
I believe
You know,
so.
he was not right in that game. So that concerned me. I know because I lost 30 grand because
Mm.
I needed him to get like 6 more points, and he obviously didn't because he got hurt. But before that injury,
Devastating.
I did not think he looked right. And keep in mind, he
Yeah.
had 3 weeks to recover before the playoffs began. So what
Mm.
happens if he pulls a calf or has an leg issue in
They'll
October?
rest them.
I mean, it could
Yeah.
be a problem.
Mm.
There are more people we've had on the show recently, John, that had told us the key to winning, and I've heard this just not on our podcast, but in general, that you've got to really be studying the matchups at the end of the season to win these. Have you gotten to that point yet, or are we overthinking it?
No, that's not totally my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
honestly. I'm not that much of an equation guy, like trying to stack and, like really set up the cards in your favor. But I do know about that whole phenomenon, and all the data shows that it is about that late season run. So it would be, uh, you know, prudent to be cognizant of what you're looking at in that late season run with your quarterback matchups and your stacking and things like that. Um, you know, you could even go really forward with it and this is again not to make it an infomercial, but this is where it goes back to fantasy points data because, I've been a projection guy forever and, I've done pretty well with it, just intuitively. And of course, I'm looking at numbers and things like that. But there was only so many levels that I kind of covered. Well, now with all this data, you can look back and see, oh, well, Jared Goff has got two matchups in week 17, 16, 17, whatever, that really look problematic based on coverage shells. So we can go and every week and say, okay, well, Jared Goff's going up, against this secondary. They play cover 3 and cover 4 at, top 20 clips. And Jared Goff, those happen to be the two coverage shells that he struggles most against.
Mm.
So, you can do things like that. Like I always say when you're an analyst, you can only project so much. And at some point you get to the game, you turn the game on and you're like, all right, let's see how this plays out. And oftentimes you're like, wow, I didn't know that this guy would have this much trouble right out of the gate. Or conversely, I didn't know he'd slay it like this. You know what I mean? A lot of that has to do with these coverage shells. So even for me, like in year 29 last year, I'm like, I think I just got like 23% better at my job in year 29.
Yeah, I'm excited to go check it out. I did not realize you had me really intrigued by the first read throws you were talking about
Oh
earlier.
yeah.
Like that to me sounds. I mean, they're all important numbers, I'm sure, but I just keep thinking about what that number can do for you when
Yep.
expecting future production, and yeah, I'm excited to go check it out for sure. Let's see. I've got some. We do this each week. I've got some ADPs,
Okay.
and I'm just curious which ones you prefer at their given ADP.
I was just texting my son, by the way, to bring me down my computer charger because my battery's running out. But hopefully you get the text and we'll be good. But yeah, let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Kyron Williams at 16 or Josh Jacobs at 34.
Well, I'd have to go with Jacobs, even though I don't really love either. I mean, I do think Kyron Williams at 16 is a little over the top there. Now you're talking best ball, right? This is still just best ball.
No, this is the ADP in general.
Oh, okay.
Like redraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kyron is slid a little bit lower than that. Let's take a look here. Well, yeah, no, you're right. There he is at 16. Like, yeah, I mean, on one hand, you understand it and you see that he was a league winner last year. But my number one rule with these type of running backs is whenever someone kind of comes out of nowhere and shocks us at running back, and then next year they have a role and they get love. It rarely works out. So I would classify Kyron Williams as quote unquote getting love. No one thought they would draft Blake Corum, but they did. I did not like Kyron Williams. And my point is simply this. We were drafting Kyron Williams at like 210 overall last year.
Mm-hmm.
I always look at ADP as polling data, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
people are smart. Like we're all into it. So the ADP is pretty good for the most part. So why the hell are we drafting him now at 10?
Right.
This is before they drafted Blake Corum, but I'm like, seriously, like you were taking him at 209 last year. Now we're going to take him at 10. I mean, that seems a little strong. I will say he was a lot better than the year before, of course. I had to sit back. I'm like, all right, let me go back and watch this kid and see what the hell I'm missing. Because he didn't test well at the combine, and he didn't look good the year before. Well, I think it's simply the offense was better, Stafford was better, and he just settled into a place where he was very patient behind that line of scrimmage and did a really good job and maximized every run, really. And that's great, and he'll have that going forward. But he also got hurt; it wore down a little bit. So I think Blake Corum is not going to steal the job, but he's going to steal, a series or two or three. And then if Williams does wear down and Blake Corum gets more opportunities, I actually think Blake Corum's more talented. So I would have to say that Kyron Williams is overvalued. I will have to take Jacobs over him, although I'm not totally in love with Jacobs.
Right. I was gonna say, what does the rookie do to his value? Because it feels like the rookie's going to get some work this year, right?
Yeah. I think Marshawn Lloyd was one of the better receiving backs in the class.
Right.
But I do think he is a little bit of a bouncer running the rock. I saw it from my own two eyes at the Senior Bowl. Now he can string together some moves and jump cuts and all that. He's really good at that, but he does need some time vision wise. So I don't think it'll crush him because Jacobs's value and role in the passing game has always been a little suspect. Don't quote me on this, but I believe through his first 3 seasons, my man didn't get a target on third down.
Okay.
What I mean? So I kind of think he'll probably be like the early down guy, and he'll get some early down check downs and the like and all that. But I don't think Marshawn Lloyd is going to really crush Josh Jacobs. If he's healthy, I think he'll be the guy.
Okay, let's see. Kelsey at 29 or Pitts at 65.
Oh, boy, I do kind of like Kelsey. I think I'm going to have to go Pitts though, because last year I was wrong about Pitts. I thought it would be, a good economical decision because he had, he fell short again. The value went down and people are like, forget this guy. And I'm like, all right, well, now I'm going to buy. The mistake I made was the two mitigating factors screwing him up were still present. Not to mention the fact that injury, he was still not 100%. Like he was practicing all of training camp, but Arthur Smith and horrible quarterback play remained,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
crushed him. But that's
Absolutely.
thrown out the window now. Kirk Cousins will get him the ball, and Zach Robinson with the Sean McVay connection. In fact, you guys are DC guys, right? Zach Robinson and Kirky were together for a year in DC, I believe.
They were.
Lamar at 40 or Jaden Daniels at 123?
I'm going to go Daniels.
Yeah, value.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very worried about Mr. Cartoon hit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like the guy's a cartoon when he's out there getting hit. And, you know, I do like how he is a good processor and doesn't really look to run. When he does, he's very decisive and he's shot out of a cannon, but he's got to protect his body a little bit more. Lamar is a different cat for sure. He's incredible. But you know, his progress as a passer has not been great, and partly because you're a little too reliant on the legs. I think Jaden Daniels is a better processor based on tape study, and probably better getting the ball down the field to his receivers than Lamar.
Puka at 10 or Cup at 36?
I'm going Puka all day long because this time last summer I was completely out on Cup. I'm like, I don't know what we're doing here, guys. Like, no one knew if he was going to play week 1 yet. 10 days before the opener, people were taking Cup at like 12 overall, 13 overall. Like,
very high.
You know, I am an ageist, and even a great player like Cooper Kupp. It's just he's a human being. I not to overly simplify things, but number one, when a guy his age and his workload, I said that year, that dream season they won the Super Bowl, that was the busiest season in the history of the NFL. Like, no receiver ran as many routes, caught as many balls. You know, they played, I believe, they played the 18 games, right? Or maybe not, but it was still 17. Then they made the playoff run. Like, I went back and I looked at the time. I'm like, nobody ever was this busy. So the next year, I'm like, you know what? I mean, he had an ACL the year before that. I was a little skeptical, and for half of the year, I was dead wrong. So I wasn't, and he was out. But then this time last year, like I said, people were willing to take him that high. If a guy that track record with myriad lower, leg issues, anything below the waist, and now you're 30, goodbye. I'm over. I'm over it. Unless if you're 30, I'll still draft you. But this sounds ridiculous, but you need to be a future Hall of Famer. I mean, that's it. Tyreek Hill and
Devontae Adams. Exactly.
And Mike Evans.
Got you.
Year.
Exactly.
Probably all going to make the Hall.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen probably just going to miss and didn't make it. I know it's, anecdotal, but that's my rule now. I'm not taking a wide receiver high first 4 or 5 rounds who's over 30 or 30 or over unless he's Canton bound.
It's funny you mentioned Keenan Allen because my final one here is DJ Moore at 30 or Adunze at 93.
Yeah, I mean, the Adunze pick could easily work out, but we need an injury, and then the offensive coordinator over there, by the way, was in Seattle, and he didn't run a ton of, 11. I'm sure Shane Waldron will run more 11, obviously, but I think I'm going to have to still default to DJ Moore, who's incredibly durable. I mean, he's a DC area guy. Well, he went to Maryland, right? I mean, he's a Philly guy actually, but tough as nails, close enough, right? Tough as nails. He's a freaking baller. So I'm going to go DJ Moore.
So I'll throw one last question to kind of wrap it up. If you're okay with that with timing, is it okay?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Absolutely. So me and Doug are in the Scott Fish Bowl. John, I don't know if you're actually partaking in it this year. I'm sure you are. I'm at the turn right now, and basically I want you to help me pick 2 of these 5 wide receivers, okay?
Okay.
So there's Brendan Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Nico Collins, and DJ Moore, my University of Maryland alumni person with you right there. Who would you pick at those two or those 5? So once again, Ayuk, Diggs, Waddle, Nico, and DJ Moore.
Now Scott Fishbowl, of course, I'm very familiar, but I actually have not played in it. So
okay,
is that a half a point PPR?
It's a full point for wide receiver.
Okay, and you're starting 3.
you start. It's a very many. There's like 5 flex. There's a lot of flex,
Yeah.
and the one contingent is I already have Purdy. I have Hurts, Purdy, and Kittle already on my team, and AJ Brown. So these are going to be kind of like my second and third wide receivers.
So it was
Ayuk,
DJ Moore was on that list, right?
Yep, Ayuk, Diggs, Waddle, Nico Collins, and DJ Moore.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Ayuk, but I think I still need to go Ayuk. I mean, I understand that, again, there is only one ball. Ricky Pearsall, that was a little bit of a head scratcher. Hey, talking about stacking, right?
Exactly right.
Want to
That's
win
why I
the
asked you.
Scottish Bowl or not?
Exactly right.
So,
Go big or go home, right? So getting Ayuk, okay.
Yeah, and Ayuk, look, where did he rank in target? I absolutely loved Ayuk last year, by the way. Like of all the good receivers that everyone knew were good, who were going in like the top 50, he was probably my number one guy. I was like, no, I don't care about a lack of volume. He's too good. Now, you can say the same thing this year. The lack of volume is a problem, but I would have to speculate that they're going to throw it just a little bit more. And there is also the chance that they do move him. And I do think that's still a possibility. So let's see here. Brandon Ayuk, really low here. I mean, this is in terms of the targets. 30th in targets. Yet in points per game, let's see where he was. I'm going to speculate it was like 11 or something like that. Okay, 16. Still a baller. Could have done a little bit more. 75 grabs, 1342, 18 yards a catch, 7 touch. I mean,
contract year. Yeah.
Contract year. They picked up the 5th-year option. He's a former first-round pick. So, yeah, it is a contract year. So either he's going to be incredibly motivated and maybe even pushing Debo off the roster at some point, or he's going to get moved. I mean,
and then be a wide receiver one somewhere else, probably, right? So that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Yep. So definitely Ayuk. So who's the other guy then? So there's Diggs, Waddle, Nico, and DJ Moore.
Yeah, it's between DJ Moore and Waddle. I mean, Waddle is so great, but there is that issue of being that number 2. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's almost like a tree and falling in the woods sometimes with Jalen Waddle. It's like, did he do it? I don't remember him. So I think I'm going to go DJ Moore there on the chance that, let's say, well, first of all, he's a baller. I mean, absolute baller. Inside, outside versatility. He can run. He's physical. He's tough. Good route runner. I've interviewed him. He's a serious dude, man. Like, all about football. Just on the chance that, let's say Keenan Allen gets hurt, Roma Dunze, maybe a little slow out of the gate. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, whoa, Caleb Williams, he's got a clear number 1. It's DJ Moore. We were all worried about target share. All of a sudden, DJ Moore is getting the rock. So I'm going to go DJ Moore there.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
John, we know you got a busy day today, so we won't take up any more of your time, but this has been fantastic, man. We appreciate it for sure.
Yeah, you got it. Sorry for the power scare there, but I'm good. I'm at 10%. I'm going upward now with the power.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Got it. Later.